A lot of times when new players get into Marvel Champions, they ask, what should I buy next? Right? What's the next thing I should buy? And usually that conversation goes down the line of, well, what hero packs should I buy? And the general advice is buy the hero that interests you the most, which is pretty decent advice. It's pretty good advice. But there are people out there that want to know, well, what about the aspect cards, right? I want to get into more deck building. I want to know what aspect cards are really worth it. What should I buy? And this is a really tough question to answer because it kind of depends if you want to go protection route, if you want to go aggression. If you do go aggression, do you want to be a minion slayer? Do you want to go for the big hits, right? There's so many different things to really try to figure out with this. So I thought it would be fun, instead of just trying to tell you what the best packs you should buy are, because I don't think I have the right answers. I think it'd be more fun to go through each cycle, go through all the hero packs in that cycle, and talk about the cards in those hero packs, right? So we're not talking about the hero cards themselves, but we're talking about the aspect and basic cards within those hero packs, and hopefully giving you enough information to make the correct purchasing decision that works for you, right? So I'm just going to go through, I'm going to talk about what I like about each card, what I don't like about it, how it maybe worked better back in the day, or it works better now, right? We're just going to talk about each card, so hopefully give you enough information. So it's going to be a new series. Hopefully you like it. We're just going to start with the first cycle for this series, right? So this is everything after the core box, but before Rise of Red Skull, and we'll just continue through and do all the packs after this. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this series, and yeah, let's go check them out. All right, so for a quick reminder, for those that don't remember, the first cycle had Green Goblin. There's no player cards in there, so don't have to worry about that. So I had Cap America, Miss Marvel, Wrecking Crew doesn't have any player cards, Thor, Black Widow, Doctor Strange, and Hulk. So let's start with Captain America. And all right, so he came in as leadership, and there's some really good cards that come in this deck, I think. Squirrel Girl is a huge one that comes in. Now, Hawkeye is in here, but Hawkeye's available through a couple decks, I believe, so you don't have to go with this one. Falcon I've never really used, so I'm not the biggest fan of Falcon. And Wonder Man, I've never really used because I really hate that cost that you must discard one card from your hand in order to play. Now, again, he swings for a lot and has 3 life, which is pretty good, but that's still pretty expensive with discarding a card, right? I generally don't want to do that. So as far as allies that come in on the leadership, they're pretty good. Squirrel Girl, I think, not that she's a must-have, but she's really good. Being able, especially early game when a lot of the heroes don't have piercing, to be able to like ping a damage onto everyone to like either knock off tough or help defeat some minions, I think is really helpful. And plus, she's only 2 costs. All right, so next up, we have Mighty Avengers, which is a card that Captain America can work really well with, because if you build a trait-based deck off of the Avenger keyword, this is really great, right? Until the end of the phase, each Avenger's character, which includes your hero, in play gets +1/+1. So I know it's 4 threat or 4 cost. That seems really expensive, but if you team it up with other cards like Avengers Tower, which also comes in this pack, you can have 4 allies out there plus yourself, plus if Captain America has a way to ready up, right? We're looking at 6 different attacks essentially at +1, which kind of makes it worth it. It's still expensive, but you can make this worth it. For me, it's the type of card I like to do where I'm making like the big final push, right? It's not something I play every single time, but that big final push when you can make the most of it, I definitely think it can be worth it. Honorary Avenger, I don't think I've ever really used. Maybe if I did like in a trait deck with Avengers, I would do it and like threw in like a card that wasn't Avenger. Maybe that works, but I don't think I've ever used it. Doubles, yeah, sure. So Avengers Tower is a pretty good card for the Avenger keyword or trait. I like it a lot. I also like that you can exhaust this tower to reduce the cost of the next Avenger ally played by this phase by 1. So if you just use that twice, right? I think that's huge. That's huge, right? Paying out 2 costs for this support to be able to use it twice to reduce the cost of allies by 2 total. Like that almost makes this free. Plus, then your ally limit can get higher. If you're doing something with like a recursion deck, that can make things really crazy. So I don't think there's any recursion cards in this one though. But I mean, you have make the call so you can put people in easier. But there's other cards that are escaping me off the top of my head right now that can help bring other cards back in. So Mockingbird's a good card, especially early on when a lot of enemies don't have steady or stalwart. Mockingbird is not the only deck you get Mockingbird in. She might be in the core box too. So it's not the only one out there, but it is a good card in general to have. So I like to look for Mockingbird, especially early on stuff, not necessarily later on. I use her a lot less now against a lot of the later villains. So Quinjet always gets a weird rep because people don't like it. Now, I think it's actually not that bad. If you can get Quinjet super early on, I actually like playing it because it just keeps gating counters, right? And then yes, you have to like use it, and it doesn't discount the card, right? So if there's 3 counters on here and you're paying for a 4 cost ally, you can't like do the difference of that, right? Do 3 and then you pay 1. No, it's got to pay for the whole thing either at level or above, right? So if you have like 20 counters on here, I mean, obviously you can only use it for like a 4, 5, 6 cost ally, and you lose everything else, which is to me is fine for a 1 cost, right? Early on game when you're still like building out and still figuring out, and you have a couple of those really expensive allies in your hand, because you should probably have like 1 or 2 of them, it's nice to be able to drop this card early on and then use this card to pay for some of those allies. I think it really helps you down the road. Now, if you're getting this card mid game, it's not really worth it. But I do like this card. I think Quinjet's the only deck this really comes in. So in Make the Call, it's a staple in a lot of decks. It's a really good card. Pay the printing cost of an ally in any player's discard pile. Put the ally into play under your control. Now multiplayer, you could probably make that a little more interesting and get other people's cards in. But it's a staple card, right? Especially if you're going through allies really fast. It's nice to be able to recur them back in. Certain things like Squirrel Girl says after Squirrel Girl enters play. So this would work. Her deal 1 damage from Make the Call, right? Because Make the Call will put them back into play. Put that ally into play, right? So that can combo off each other. So it's nice to be able to get like Squirrel Girl, for example, and recur it a bunch of times. Strength in numbers is really nice when you use like Avengers Tower and what's the other one? Queen Carrier or something like that. I don't know what it is. Strength in numbers is good when you have a bunch of allies out there and you don't want to use them all right away for attacking. You can exhaust them to get huge card draw. It's a really nice card for that. Big fan. Power leadership's fine. Followed when an attached scheme is defeated, deal 4 damage to an enemy. This is a card I feel like I need to use more of. It's actually a pretty decent card with a ally who can a hero that can thwart a lot. It's pretty strong, right? It's pretty strong card. So I like it. It's a weird card that I haven't played all the time, right? It is weird, but I do want to use it more. I think it could be a decent card. Expert defense, when your hero defense against attack, it gets +3 for the attack. It's fine. Nothing amazing. I think I rarely use this card, if ever, so it's not a big card. Enhanced awareness, I've rarely used, maybe once or twice, but that's it. And enraged, I've wanted to use more of. You attach to an ally, attached ally gets +2 attack and takes 1 consequential damage after it attacks. Again, it's good for like that push, right? If you're trying to make a push, it's really good. If you don't mind burning through allies, it's not too bad. So overall, deck is pretty strong. Caps cards are pretty good in there. And there's definitely some standouts in the leadership for sure that I still use to this day. All right, next up is Miss Marvel. She came in on protection. Nova is a card that a lot of people like. I've never been the biggest Nova fan. I don't mind him. I just feel like he's expensive for what he does. So when an enemy initiates an attack against you, spend a energy resource, deal 2 damage to the enemy. Early on, this was actually really nice if there was a bunch of minions and you had that energy resource to like easily be able to get out there. It's nice for that. But other than that, I don't know. 1, 2, 3 stat line for a 4 cost seems kind of weak nowadays. Like, it's not bad, but it just seems a little bit weaker. Now, is that to say that Nova doesn't have a place? Of course, Nova has a place in decks. It's just, I feel like it's slowly over time getting weaker. It's just not as good. There's other better options, I guess. So get behind me when a treachery card is revealed from the encounter deck, cancels 1 reveal effects, and that villain attacks you instead. I've rarely used this because this is basically like getting a treachery assault card, which is pretty bad, right? Assault, is that the one that just the villain attacks you, not the minions? I think so. But this to me is not that great. Like if it was a truly terrible treachery, generally speaking, the treachery would attack you, right? A lot of treacheries, not all of them, but I don't know. There's very rarely, if ever, I've ever used this card. Plus, it's 1 cost, which just seems like a lot to be attacked. Like it seems weird to pay a cost in a card to get attacked. I don't know. I almost rather just deal with the treachery, but maybe that's just me. All right, Preemptive Strike is actually a card I like a lot. 1 cost event, when a boost card is turned face up while the villain attacks, cancel all boost icons on that card and deal 1 damage to the villain for each boost icon canceled this way. It's also a defense card, right? Hero interrupt defense. This is important for like flow like water and stuff like that. And this also now makes you the defender. So if there's anything that triggers off of like being the defender, this card will help trigger that without you actually exhausting for it, right? So this is a big 1.4 rules update where you are considered defending if you just play a defense card, right? So this is kind of a big thing. So anyway, this card will help trigger that, and you don't actually have to exhaust to defend. But I like this card a lot. It's still a card I use quite a fair amount. Tackle's a weird card. I like it. I think it's a good stun card, but you have to use that fist resource to deal 3 damage to an enemy. 3/3 is pretty weak, but to stun an enemy, especially on solo, is really good. Now, there's a bunch of villains out there now that have steady and stalwart, so this card loses some value there. But overall, I still think this is actually a pretty decent card to be able to stun an enemy and kind of get through, especially if you have to get through like a building stage or whatever, and to deal 3 damage. it's not bad. It's not, I use in every deck or anything like that, but it's not bad. Protection of all of us, normal card, that's fine. Energy Barrier, I think, is a really good card. This is one of the first cards that really helped out Iron Man with him being able to build out quicker because it is a tech card, tech upgrade. Was that what it was? Tech upgrades? Yeah, I think tech upgrades that help build Iron Man out a bit so they get extra hand size on his hero form. But anyway, regardless, it's still a really good card. Taking 1 damage or being able to stop 1 damage and ping that damage back, especially if the enemy has tough or the enemy has retaliate, because this is not an attack, so it doesn't trigger retaliate, which is really nice too. So I'm a big fan of this card. Lockjaw is pretty good. I like Lockjaw. You can play him from your discard pile, which is the big thing. Now, I still think he's a bit expensive for what he is, so it's not something that you can pull over and over and over. But Lockjaw is good, right? Lockjaw definitely has his place. If you're running a lot of doubles in hand, and we'll get into the gray doubles eventually later. But if you're playing with those cards, right, it will help pay for Lockjaw. So there are appropriate times for Lockjaw. I think he's pretty strong. He's pretty decent. If you could heal him up with first aid, it's even better. But yeah, I think he's definitely a solid card. I should probably play him a little bit more than I do, but yeah. Avengers Mansion, you should have a ton of these, probably in the core box as well, I think. It's a good card. It has its place. Endurance is one of my most used cards. I love Endurance. Adding 3 hit points and like a 9 hit point here is 30% life increase. Wait, did I do that math right? Yeah. Is it like a 30-some% life increase, which is huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Endurance, I use a lot. I'm a big fan of it. Enhanced reflexes, I don't think I've ever really used. Concussive blow, I don't mind, right? Confusing an enemy, if you pay that enemy, it's basically tackle, right? But not stunning. You get to confuse. So it's nice, and again, just like what is it called? Tackle. It's kind of lose a little bit of value while steady and stalwart becoming more popular keywords. So it's not great, but it's not bad. Early on, it was much better, I guess, but now it's fine. All right, so morale boost is an interesting card because you choose a hero until the end of the round. That hero gets +1/+1/+1. This could be good, especially for like ready up type heroes like Quicksilver later on, or even Captain America, right? This is kind of a nice card for Cap, where okay, now he's swinging for 3, you can ready him up with I could do this all day, right? And then swing 3 again, and then if you want to defend with the shield, then you defend 4, right? Because it's for the round, not just the phase. So there is use to this card. It's pretty interesting. A lot of leadership decks aren't really built around like buffing up your hero, and most of it's around allies. But if you want to do like a hero buffing morale deck type thing, you could do it. It'd be pretty interesting. Melee has gotten some life recently because of warrior skill. We could talk about warrior skill much later on, but basically adds +1 to your attack. So this would make this a 3/4/4 card instead of a 3-cost 3/3 card. It'd be a 3-cost 4/4 card. But it's a fine card. It's somewhat useful. I didn't really use it a lot early on, but I'm starting to find more use for it, especially as aggression uses more minion heavy decks, or like minion drawing heavy decks, I should say. It becomes a more interesting card of like, okay, I can easily start like weakening all the minions on the table, right? And then have my hero attack to like finish off a minion or 2. So it's not a bad card. I feel like I just didn't play enough early on. Downtime is fine. Downtime was used pretty regularly early on. There's a better card nowadays, and we could talk about that later. But Downtime, I think, is a pretty decent staple of a card, especially if you're going down and healing a fair amount. Next up, we have Thor. And starting with Thor is Hercules. And the idea of Thor's deck in general was always that he was supposed to be like an ally or a minion gatherer, right, to do a lot of damage because he has card draw. So this is an interesting card. I like the idea of it, but you would need like a decent amount of, you don't really need a decent amount. You need like 2 minions engaged with you to make like a 4/1/3/4 card, which is pretty decent, right? Pretty decent. So you need a couple minions out there. He can, at 3 damage, can most likely destroy like the early game minions. Not so much later game minions, but earlier game minions he could take out a decent amount of. So he's not bad, but he's one that just I didn't use much early on for sure. But I think he's got a place nowadays. Valkyrie, the GOAT. After Valkyrie enters play, you deal 2 damage to a minion or 3 damage if you pay for this card using an energy resource. I actually really like this because it's an easy way to, you're already paying for the card, right? So you basically get free 2 damage or 3 damage, depending on how you pay for her, to a minion. I think that's pretty strong. I think that's pretty good. Then she come in and start doing damage to a different minion. I really like that. I think that's interesting. So I'm a fan of this card. It's not like massively huge, but it's got its place. All right, next up we have Chase Them Down. After your hero attacks and defeats an enemy, remove 2 threat from scheme. I still use Chase Them Down. I still like this card. I think this card isn't bad. It's not like amazing or anything, but especially for a minion slaying deck, I think it's pretty good. And a lot of aggression, especially early on, had a hard time thwarting. A lot of aggression hero or aggression-based heroes had a hard time thwarting. So this was their way of kind of getting around it. And I think it's not terrible, right? It's not amazing, but it's not terrible. Speaking about not amazing, is Get Over Here. So deal 1 damage to a minion if you have the aerial trait, engage that minion. It's not very good. This is more of a multiplayer card, not really a solo card. So I never really use it, but 1 damage and being able to gauge it, like that could be great for helping out your teammate, but for just like regular solo play, I don't think I've ever used it. Mean Swing is interesting. So when your hero makes a basic attack, exhaust a weapon upgrade, you can upgrade on your hero. Your hero gets +3 for the attack. It can be good, right? Especially if you have a weapon that wouldn't normally get exhausted, and I think we'll get into that later. It's really good, but if you have a weapon that you have to exhaust, like do stuff with, then it's not as good, but it's not terrible. Power of Aggression is a fine card. And then Hall of Heroes, I like the idea. I've just never... I have to like build around Hall of Heroes to get Hall of Heroes to work. It's not a bad card. It's a 2-cost support. After you defeat a minion, place 1 glory counter here, and on your alter ego, exhaust Hall of Heroes to remove 3 glory counters from it to draw 3 cards. Now, if you have a minion focused deck, it's really strong, but you have to kind of build around Hall of Heroes. So we've talked about it in the past where we had aggression decks where or the aggression trait built stuff that we talked about, like the aggression deck example. And if you do like the big swing type decks, this is useless, right? This is a useless card. But if you do a minion kind of harvesting type deck, this works great, especially if you have a hero that can flip down and can do all right there. It's fantastic. On multiplayers, is a pretty good card too, because if your teammate gets a minion, right, and you can go defeat their minions, it helps you out a lot, and then that allows you to flip down while they like make sure that the threat doesn't get too crazy. There's a lot to do with that card. It does have its use in solo. I think it's better in multiplayer, but it does have its use in solo. You have to recognize you have to build around that card specifically. All right, Battle Fury. After your hero attacks and defeats a minion, deal 1 damage to your hero and discard Battle Fury. Ready your hero. I've never used this. I don't think I've ever used this card. Does it have a place? Maybe. I don't think it's that often you use it. If you have a hero that's swinging for a lot, sure, it's not bad, especially if you're knocking out minions constantly. It's not terrible. I like the idea of it, but dealing 1 damage to yourself, that's tough. That's really tough. And you can only use it once, right? So you use it once because you discard it, and you can only have one under, or max 1 per player under your control. That's rough. That's kind of rough. So I've never really used it. I've never seen a good use for it. So if anyone else has, let me know, because that'd be interesting. Yarnborn is the weapon I'm talking about from before, because this is a weapon. It's a 1-cost upgrade. After your hero attacks, spend a fist resource to deal 2 damage to your enemy. So you don't have to exhaust this card, right? So I like teaming up this card with Mean Swing, because you can, like it says, when your hero makes a basic attack, let's say it's 2, exhaust a weapon upgrade, your hero gets +3 for the attack. So now you're swinging 5. Then this is exhausted, but that's okay. You don't need this to be unexhausted. After your hero makes an attack that we just talked about, spend a fist resource to deal 2 damage. So now it's like 7 damage if your hero is based off of 2 damage, right? But 5 damage between these 2 cards for a 1 cost is pretty sweet, right? Or 1 fist resource, I should say, is pretty sweet. Like, it works pretty well. And since this upgrade just stays out there, I really like Yarnborn with Mean Swing. Now, does it work outside of that? Yeah, you can make Yarnborn work and Mean Swing work, but like that combo, I really like. I think that's a pretty fun combo. Hemdall isn't bad, right? You can, as a 5, 2, 3, 4 card, you have to use his look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck, discard 1 of them, and put the others back in any order. Being able to know what's going to come in the encounter deck is obviously very strong, but it's very expensive to do. So you have to really balance that correctly. It's tough. It's a tough balance. I'm going to be honest. And I know early on, I did not take advantage of this as much as I should, but as someone who draws Shadows of the Past constantly, this is a card that can be good, right? It is a card that can be good. It definitely has its place. I won't say it's a useless card, but over time, I think it's gotten better as we've recognized that being able to control the encounter deck is so important nowadays, because there are just some bad expert cards you don't want to deal with. Invulnerability, I never really used until Colossus. I'll just be honest. Like, I never really used this card. 3 costs to basically have a round where you don't take damage was never really worth that much to me. But with Colossus, who uses as resources, right, with Tough, it's a bit more useful, but this wasn't like a massive card for me. Then you get your doubles, you get your Avengers Mansion, that's whatever. Space Fan is huge. I love this card. This card has saved me a lot of times on solo play, especially if you watch any of my games. Under Surveillance is a card I use a ton. So Thor's deck I really like for getting this because I don't think Under Surveillance comes in anything else. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But it's a really, really good card to get. It's a really strong card. Now we talk about teamwork. When you use your basic power, thwart, or attack, exhaust an ally control, add that ally's matching power to your hero's power for this use. It's not bad, right? It's a way to basically for your ally not to take consequential damage. So it can be helpful if you have a super strong ally out there. It's not terrible. I don't think it's great. I've never really used it a ton, but it's not terrible. All right, second win. Heal 4 damage for your identity. 5 if you pay for this with using a science resource. Not bad, right? Anyway, you can heal. This was one of our first real heal cards in protection. For in general, I think it was one of our first heal cards for like aspect focus. And it's not bad. 3 for 5 on heal is pretty good to be able to do that while staying up in hero form. Now you could do this in alter ego, right? It's just an action card. But being able to stay in hero and in solo and be able to heal on your hero side is kind of huge. It's a big thing. It's also a very important thing if you want to win in like expert a lot. You have to be able to heal. You have to be able to heal on your hero side. And then finally we have enhanced physique. I think I've used it once or twice just for fun, but it's not like a card that's like, wow, this is amazing or anything. So it's fine, but it's nothing crazy good. All right, next up we have Black Widow. So she came in Justice, and a lot of her cards kind of just work for her. She's very self-contained with this Justice. So like Agent Coulson, after Agent Coulson enters play, search your deck and discard pile for a prep card and add it to your hand. Generally speaking, nowadays the only prep cards are in Black Widow. Now there are a couple basic ones, I believe, but you're not really building around that, right? Realistically, Agent Coulson is going to be someone that you use for Black Widow. Quake, I like. Quake, after a minion schemes, deal 2 or exhaust Quake and deal 2 damage to that minion. It's really kind of nice. Now it is after the fact, so it's a little bit weaker, but still you get 2 damage pretty basically for free because you don't take consequential damage, so that's kind of nice. Stealth Strike I've used a ton, especially recently. But you deal 4 damage to an enemy. If the enemy is defeated by its attack, remove 2 threat from a scheme. So being able to get some Justice cards with that have some decent attack, right? 4 for 3 or 3 for 4 isn't great, but 4 attack is decent enough. But to remove 2 threat from a scheme on top of it is pretty nice. Double yellow is fine. Interrogation Room, after you defeat a minion, exhaust Interrogation Room, remove 1 threat from the scheme. It's okay. You can only have 1, which isn't nearly as good, in my opinion, but it's fine. I've never really used it a ton. Surveillance Team, it comes in with 3 snoop counters, and you exhaust it to remove 1 threat from a scheme. Now, or remove 1 counter and then remove 1 threat. This got a huge boost later on, right? Right now, this card isn't great at this part of the cycle, but later on, this card gets a boost, and we'll talk about much later on. But as of right now, this was an okay card. Nothing great. Counterintelligence was a card that basically wasn't used a ton back in the day, but now it's used a lot more because it's for solo players. It's almost like a free confuse, almost, because there's a lot of stalwart and there's a lot of steady out there nowadays. You can't always confuse the enemy. But what you could do with this is put counterintelligence out there, you flip down, and then if they scheme for 3, 4, 5, right, you could stop 3 of that. So it's like a soft confuse almost. And for enemies with stalwart and steady, this is a very useful card. This is a card I use a lot more nowadays, and I really like this card. All right, Spycraft. When you reveal an encounter card, discard Spycraft, cancel its effects of that card and discard, then reveal another card. This obviously can be good if it's like the worst encounter card, right? If it's one of the worst encounter cards, this can be good. It's not a card I use a ton, but it definitely has its place, right? It definitely has its place. Nick Fury is fine. Nick Fury you should already have from the core box, so we won't spend too much time on that. We got doubles. Queen Carrier is pretty good. This might be the first time you see Queen Carrier, that I think about it. Now, Queen Carrier is available in other decks, pretty sure at least, but this might be the first time you see it. It's pretty good, right? It's a pretty good resource generator card for 3, and you have to be an Avenger. This will set a pattern for later on in the game, but it's a fine card. I think for someone that doesn't have resource generators, it's definitely worth looking into. All right, now we have Target Acquire. This is a card I actually don't use as much as I should because it's actually a really good card. It's a 1-cost upgrade. Hero response: after a boost card is turned face up, discard Target Acquired and cancel that card's boost ability. There's a lot of stuff later on in the game where you get that little star for the boost ability. That is massive, massively detrimental, and to be able to cancel that is kind of huge, right? It is a really huge card. It can be a really huge card. This is a card I need to start using more in certain decks because it definitely has its place. It's definitely can be strong. Let me put it that way. It can be a strong card, and I think it's again one that is overlooked a lot, but but it's actually a pretty decent card. All right, next we have counterattack. One cost upgrade after you take any amount of damage. After you take damage from the enemy attack, discard counterattack, deal an equal amount of damage to the enemy. I don't think I've ever really used this. It's not bad. I just don't think I've ever really used it. So it's fine. I'm sure it has its place, but I haven't been big with it. Now, Rapid Response is a massive card, right? So it's 2 cost upgraded. Discard an ally you control, or I'm sorry, after an ally you control is defeated, discard Rapid Response, put that ally into play for your discard pile and deal 1 damage to it. We talked a bit about this with recursion before on Captain America stuff. This is the other recursion card that is huge. It's absolutely fantastic card. I believe there's only 3 of them out there, so you might have to get Black Widow for that card, but it's definitely a very solid card. Then we have Defensive Stance, 2 cost upgrade. When you would take any amount of damage, discard the Defensive Stance, prevent 3 of that. It's like, you know, what did we just say that was? The Space Fan one, or not Space Fan, Counterintelligence, right? It's Counterintelligence, but for taking damage. I've tried it. It's not bad, right? It's not a bad card. It's fine. I just feel like there's so many other defense cards that I use over this, but it can have its place, but I don't think it's anything amazing. And then Espionage. You can only use it on a spy character. When the search keyword on the encounter card would be resolved, discard Espionage and you get to draw 2 cards, right? So you still do the surge, but you also get to draw 2 cards, which is kind of nice, right? It can be nice. And now for spy is just Black Widow, and that's it? Because what's his face? Gambit's just a thief, right? I mean, he might be a spy too. I'm not sure. I don't know. He might just be a thief though. So there aren't many spy characters. So that's the only downside of this, but you know, it's not a bad card. All right, next up we have Strange, and he's a protection type hero. So Brother Voodoo, I liked a lot early on. It's still not bad, right? Still not a bad card. After Brother Voodoo enters play, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an event card and add it to your hand. He's a 3/2/1/3 card, so being able to thwart 2 is nice, especially for solo. And looking for an event card can be really useful. So he definitely has his place. I like him. I think he's pretty good. Clea, when Clea is defeated, shuffle her into her owner's deck. That's really nice for making sure you don't deck out too fast. 2/1/1/2. You're basically using her to thwart 1 or attack 1, and then take it as a block, and then shuffle her back in. Right. That's basically what Clea is used for at this point. Iron Fist is huge. Iron Fist is still, I think, one of the strongest allies out there. A 4-cost ally, 1, 2, 3, but it comes in with 2 Mystic counters. When Iron Fist attacks an enemy, remove 1 Mystic counter, and you get to stun that enemy and then deal 1 damage to it. So, right, it does 3 damage now, essentially, and you stun the enemy. That's huge. I still love Iron Fist to this day. He's super useful and can do that 2 times in a row. That's huge. Now, Desperate Defense is a kind of a staple now for me in a lot of my kind of perfect protection type decks. 1-cost event, when your hero defends against an attack, it gets +2 for that attack. If you take no damage from that attack, ready your hero. That's really nice and useful, especially if you're doing it multiple times. Momentum Shift is a huge card. 2-cost event, heal 2 damage from your hero, deal 2 damage to an enemy. I still use this card to this day. It's super powerful and useful. Highly recommend. Med Team, huge card, right? Use 3 medical counters. It's a 3-cost support. Exhaust Med Team and remove 1 medical counter from here. Heal 2 damage from a friendly character, right? So that's really nice for helping out and healing. Night Nurse is a huge card. 1-cost support. It comes with 3 medical counters. The Night Nurse, or exhaust Night Nurse and remove 1 medical counter from her. Heal 1 damage from a hero, which is fine, but discarding a status card is huge. So if you're stunned or confused, being able to discard that status card is massively huge. It's really useful with her. Unflappable is still a card that a lot of people use this day. After you defend against an attack and take no damage, exhaust Unflappable, draw 1 card, right? You get to draw a card, which is really strong, especially in perfect protection type decks. Really useful. Warning, when a hero would take any amount of damage, reduce that damage by 1. I don't think I've really used it besides using it as a defense card just so I could be the defending like hero that we talked a bit about with the 1.4 rules, but that's about it. Mansion, we've already talked about. Sorcerer Supreme for Mystics is a massively huge card. It's much needed. You get +1 hand size while in hero form. That's huge. That's absolutely huge card. It's worth its weight in gold. Skilled Strike, when your hero makes a basic attack, it's +2 for that attack. That's okay. All right, it's okay. It's an 0 for 2 card basically when you attack. It's fine. Foiled, when a boost card is turned face up during a scheme activation, cancel its boost icons. Can be huge, right? We're seeing nowadays there's like 3 or 4 boost icons on the card. Being able to cancel that for 0, that's a lot, right? That is a lot. If you're playing in a deck where there's a lot of like a high boost average, this could be worth it for sure. And then we have Iron Man, which I didn't realize Iron Man was a part of this deck. Huh. I guess he is. Weird. So Iron Man is a 4-2-2-3. Reduce the cost to play each upgrade on Iron Man by 1, which is fine. I don't think I've ever really used Iron Man because I don't put a ton of upgrades on people. So, or on allies. Maybe I should. If you're doing like a good Voltron deck build, this might be worth it. But I haven't done a ton with Iron Man, so I don't know. It's fine, but nothing special. All right, last but not least, we have Hulk. Now, Hulk's got some good cards in it, or in him. 3 cost Brawn, 1/1/5. After Brawn attacks, remove 1 threat from a scheme. This is a great card, by the way. Absolutely great card. Being able to do 1 damage and 1 threat removal on aggression is really, really useful. Super strong. Really like Brawn in this. Sentry's not bad, right? 4-2-3-5. After Sentry enters play under your control, deal yourself 1 encounter card. It's bad if the encounter cards are terrible, like a Ronin, like you don't want more encounter cards. But for a 2/3/5, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? It's not the worst thing. It's more situational, right? It's not an amazing card, but I don't think it's a terrible card by any means. If you use them for its full like attack ability, right? So being able to swing, let's say 4 times and be a blocker, that's 12 damage for 4 costs essentially in 1 bag encounter card. Now, the encounter card could be terrible, but you're kind of rolling the dice on this, which isn't awful. Then we have She-Hulk. She-Hulk gets +1 attack for each damage on her, which is kind of nice. So I personally like to thwart with She-Hulk first turn and then attack the next turn. So there's a 4-2-1-4. So you do the 2 threat first because getting threat removal with her is huge. And then you get to take 2 damage. And so now she's attacking for 3 the next turn. You can either use her as a blocker or have her attack for 4 the following turn. So she can be really aggressively strong. But that's how I like to use her because I like to get some damage on her to get to attacking faster. Dropkick is a 3 cost event. Deal 4 damage to an enemy. If you pay this card using only Fist resources, stun this card and draw 1 card. If you have a high Fist resource deck, this is an amazing card. If you don't, it's not as great, right? It's not as great. You have to pay this using only Fist resources because 3 for 4 damage is not good. But stunning an enemy and drawing a card, not terrible, right? Not terrible at all. So it can be good, but you have to like play it right. Toe for toe, I like. If you have a hero that has a lot of hit points or a way to defend this attack, a 1/5 is pretty strong, right? It's pretty strong and pretty good, especially if you're already kind of doing damage and this is like the last thing you have to do. And you have a ton of health, or you do have an ally that can block this. Super useful card to be able to do 5 damage relatively quickly. Definitely a strong card. Oops. All right, next up we'll have you'll pay for that. After the villain attacks, you remove 1 threat from a scheme for each damage you took, maximum of 5. This can be good with someone like Hulk who has a lot of life and some later heroes that have a lot of life. It can be good, but it's not something I use a ton. But 1/5, if you can use it to its full potential, yeah, it's all right. Power of Aggression is fine. You'll see a ton of them. All right, then we have Martial Prowess, a 2 cost upgrade. Exhaust Martial Prowess to generate a Fist resource for an attack. Great card, still use it a lot to this day. To the Rescue, remove 2 threat from a scheme for a 2 cost. I don't think I've ever used it. Your doubles, your Avenger Mansion. Helicarrier, you should already have in the core box. Beat Cop. I love Beat Cop. I'm such a fan of Beat Cop. So a 3 cost support, exhaust Beat Cop to remove 1 threat from a scheme to place it on Beat Cop. Then you can exhaust and discard Beat Cop to deal 1 damage to a minion for each threat on here. So even now, it's pretty good, right? Being able to get like, 5-6 counters on Beat Cop. I've had Beat Cop take out like Ice Giants, right? Because you play the long game with the Beat Cop. You have to get a lot of counters on Beat Cop. So it takes a while to build up, and Beat Cop is expensive. But the value can be there if you get the card early on. Mid to late game, not useful at all, but it can be very strong. Inspiring Presence, you can only be an Avenger. You heal 1 damage from an ally and ready it. Not bad, right? Not bad if you're building a deck around that. This could definitely be strong, again, for like an Avengers type deck. Electrostatic Armor, I think there's a fair amount of these out there now, so you'll need to get this pack for it. But it's a 1 cost upgrade. After you defend against an attack, deal 1 damage to the attacking character. Now, this is huge with the defense 1.4 rules update we talked about, right? So you don't actually have to exhaust to defend. If you play a defense card, you are defending against an attack, right? So this becomes more useful if you're doing stuff with that, right? You don't have to like always exhaust defend it to get the attack. You just play a defense card and that deals 1 damage to the attacking character. So that's kind of big. That got better with over time. Resourceful, kind of like the rest of these, it's a 1/1 card, right? You discard Resourceful to generate a wild resource. I guess if you really need one at some point, it's not bad, but it's not something I've ever really like used or anything. So we talked a lot about aggression in a lot of these decks. There's a lot of good aggression cards. If you want to see different aggression archetypes, check out this video right here, right? This goes into detail, 3 different archetypes that I like or that are decent enough, that are interesting. So you can start deck building from there. And if you would do me a huge favor, make sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe. It really helps with the channel. See you all next time.